Good Wednesday morning, Quad Cities. It is 9 o'clock here on this Wednesday, October 8th, 2025. And the time right now is for Ask Andrew. It is good to be back with you here for another week of taking your fantastic weather questions. Remember, this is the only half-hour weather-related show here in the Quad Cities where we give you the opportunity to ask me your burning weather questions. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about the weather pattern, of course, that's going on right now. And we'll also have some time to dig into some of the questions that I answered for you throughout the week. So welcome aboard. If this is your first time, we are so happy to have you here. And we hope you come back every week. Each week, we do a brand new episode of this live on the A+ app. And it is also being simulcast on our Facebook page. So if you have a question, there are two ways to get that question to me right here in the studio. The best and preferred way is to shoot us a text message, and that number is 309-304-0888. It is right at the bottom of your screen there. That will ensure that I see it, our digital team sees it, and a lot of us will be able to see it to make sure it gets out here. Now, of course, you can also chime in. If you're watching on our Facebook live stream, you can put your question in the comments section. However, I forewarn people, a lot of times Facebook is really funky about the comment section, and some of them don't come through for whatever reason. So text method is best. You see that number at the bottom of your screen. That'll get your question directly to me, and away we'll go with answering those coming up in about 10 to 15 minutes. Let's talk about the current weather situation. That's how we always like to start the day off here. It's been beautiful. I really have been liking this new fall pattern we finally got in here. We've gotten rid of the heat. We've gotten rid of all of that scorching heat. We didn't have much humidity with it, but still, it was a little warmer than many of us appreciate this time of year. This morning, we have had so much sunshine. It's been beautiful. It's going to be one of those days where it's going to be hard to find any kind of cloud in the sky. Should make for some nice temperatures this afternoon, too. By the way, in case you missed it, the supermoon for October, the harvest moon, last night, gorgeous. Bob Olmsted captured this picture, likely from Galesburg, and you can see the detail. Just incredible. Now, if you missed it, no worries. You're going to be able to see it again tonight and the next night, and likely up until we get to about the weekend. Then we'll start to see this disappear a little bit more. But this is just beautiful. So thank you for Bob for, as always, sending this in. And between him and a couple of other folks that we have in Galesburg that send us some amazing pictures, yeah, that's a beautiful shot there. We get another supermoon in November. We also get another one in December. And guess what? We get another supermoon in January. So the next 3 months will include supermoons that we get to enjoy. What is a supermoon? Just to remind you, it means that the moon appears a little bit brighter and a little bit bigger in our sky, especially now that we're in autumn, lower angle, right? That definitely has a lot to do with it. So check that out if you get a chance the next couple of nights. We'll have plenty of clear skies that will enable you to do that quite easily. This morning, we had a few hometowns that were starting off with temperatures in the 30s, mainly north along Highway 20. We, meanwhile, here in the Metro Quad Cities, we were in the 40s, and right now we're in the 50s. So we're making some good progress here. We will reach the upper 60s this afternoon. It's very similar to yesterday, the only difference being we're not going to see any clouds. And the winds will also be lighter today, too. But check this out. As we go into tonight, there will be some patchy frost potential, and I think that is especially true for our hometowns right in here. If you're along Highway 30 to Highway 20, that's where we could potentially see some of that. Now, is this going to be a widespread killing frost? Do we need to bring everything inside, all the plants that we want to save? No, I do not believe we're going to see that. But don't be surprised if you leave your vehicle outside overnight. You may have to do a little window scraping as we go into the morning tomorrow, so be prepared for that. But you know what? If you're not having to commute until later in the morning, well after sunrise, the sun will melt it all away for you. We are expecting high temperatures tomorrow to get back into the low 70s, another gorgeous day. And this gorgeous weather is going to continue for the rest of the week. Earlier this morning, we had frost and freeze warnings to the north of us. In fact, you can see where the freeze warning is. It's right here in northern Minnesota, also into northern Wisconsin. Further south, in fact, just 2 rows of counties, about right here, we had a frost advisory this morning, just north of us. So that's telling you we're getting closer to that time of year, or if you're a green thumber, you're going to have to keep an eye on those overnight lows. So that leads into this question, when are we expecting that first frost or that first freeze? We can go back into past history and tell us what's going to happen here. So what I'm showing you is every single first frost and freeze that we have had in the Quad Cities since 1932. Each dot represents the date. So on the bottom row here, you've got the years. On the side row here to the left, that is the date. So at the bottom of this row is September 15th. In the middle here is about our average, which is October 15th through the 20th. And then the top is the later parts of November. Notice this clustering we've got going on right here. This is the last decade's worth of frost and freeze dates. There are many of these that are well into October, and actually we have a few that have snuck into early November. That's what I think is probably going to happen again this year, is based on the fact that we've had so much warmth still that we're likely going to see our first frost and freeze push back a little bit. So likely going to happen in the last week of October or so. That is likely what we're looking at. But look at the average trend line, which is this line right here. This tells us, are we seeing earlier frost dates or are we seeing later frost dates? And the fact that this line is climbing shows us that we're seeing later frost dates, and that should surprise nobody, including myself. So green thumbers, if you're curious when I think we're going to have to worry about this, likely will not be until we get to the end of the month. We still got some time on that. Also, we had some breaking news yesterday during GMQC at 11, a brand new tropical storm in the Atlantic, and I mean way out in the Atlantic. Hello, Tropical Storm Jerry. This is expected to become a hurricane and could eventually become a strong one at that. It looks really well organized on the satellite presentation. Like past storms that we've seen in the Atlantic so far this year, this is going to take a bend, a little curve again, back to the north and northeast. It is not expected to impact anything in terms of coastal areas of the United States. It does kind of sideswipe Bermuda a little bit, probably with the outer bands of this, but other than that, we are not expecting anything really wild here in the United States. Right now, the National Hurricane Center only has it as a Category 1. I think it likely is going to get a little bit stronger than that, like we've seen with past storms already this season. But again, it looks like another fish storm that will be heading out to sea. There is one more area that the National Hurricane Center is going to be monitoring for some tropical activity, and that right now is in the Gulf. And you can see that right here. Only a 10% probability of development is projected with this little disturbance here. It is worth watching, especially if it can meander its way northward, and right now that is not the expectation. It is only expected to go further west, and so once it gets into land here into Mexico itself, that would shut down any potential further development. But if it were to meander to the north, that would certainly get a little bit more concerning, because the Gulf right now, the waters are quite warm, and there is favorability in terms of the winds and also lifting going on in this part of the world, where if it were to go migrate itself northward, it could develop into something further. But as of right now, that is not the expectation, thank goodness. Let's go to the 8-day tracker. I'll show you the 14-day as well, and then we'll recap the questions we had this week during GMQC. So here's the 8-day and all of its glory. And, paying attention to these overnight lows, you notice the coolest of which are going to be right here as we go into Thursday, and also potentially for some of you into Friday with those 40s. But as we go later on into the period here, we're getting a lot more temperatures in the 50s that are starting to appear overnight. And we're also getting close to 80 degrees again as we go into Monday. Monday is that next shower chance, by the way. And even though it doesn't look like a big one, it's something. It certainly looks like it's going to be very light, whatever does come our way. Here's the 14-day tracker. You can see the continuation of that up and down pattern here. But overall, we're staying consistently free from those widespread 80s, and we're also staying out of the 90s. I think it's safe to say the 90s are done. Still planning on that second weekend there to be trending cooler. That could be possibly when we'll have to monitor the overnight low temperatures for that frost freeze potential. So we'll keep an eye on that, but nothing in the immediate term right now that is too concerning in terms of frost and freeze. We had some really great questions this week for Ask Andrew during GMQC. We were talking about the number of 90s, and we were also talking about, are we seeing a reversal? Because we had so much heat, and I talked about the end of September getting warmer, does that mean, on the flip side of that, that spring is getting colder? You think there would be some balance with that, right? So we'll tackle the question we had first this morning, and that dealt with the number of 90-degree days that we have seen so far this year. And that came from, I believe it was Terry and Moline. Yes, how many 90-plus degree days have we seen? Here's the answer, and we organized it in this nice chart for you so you can see. And it all started with June. June was the month where we really saw this surge of 90-degree days that came in. And there you see, too, that surge kind of continued on and off throughout the year. We had another surge in September here where we saw 5 days worth of 90. So in orange is what we've seen. In blue, that is the average. So we've had 26 days in the 90s so far this year. We have 23 days on average. So yes, this year we had more 90s than usual, about 3 more 90s than usual. But what I always like to do is you don't want to focus your attention on just 1 year. You want to look at the overall trend in terms of what these 90s are doing. So what I'm going to show you here, and I'm going to step over back to this side. These are the number of 90-degree or hotter days each year since the early 1900s. So what this allows us to do is look at the line here and see, are we seeing more 90-degree days each year, or are we seeing fewer of them? And this may surprise you. You look at the lines here, yep, there's a lot of jaggedness going on there, but what you want to pay attention to is the trend line, and that is the dotted line right here that I've put on the graph for you. And yes, it is falling. That means we are seeing fewer 90-degree plus days each year since the early 1900s. And you say to yourself, well, we always hear about climate change and global warming and that temperatures are getting hotter and the planet is warming up. How in the world can that be true if we're not seeing nearly as many 90-degree days as we have in the past? Shouldn't this be flipped the other direction? Shouldn't we be seeing more? Well, the reason for that is, and this will actually be one of the things I'll focus on Monday for Ask Andrew during GMQC, is our overnight low temperatures. Those are the ones that are seeing a sharp rise. We're seeing lows at night that are staying considerably warmer than what we've had in years past. And it's really the overnight lows that are adding to that rising temperature trend. It's not so much the daytime highs. And this tells that story perfectly. We're not seeing more 90s compared to years past. We're actually seeing fewer 90s. And actually, there was a question that came in to my Facebook inbox, and I'll address that here too while we're here, asking, do farming practices have something to do with this? The fact that we're seeing fewer 90s, that is. And the answer is yes. Remember back to Storm Track 8 University, way back in the COVID era when Morgan and I did that. We talked about how air temperatures differ depending on the amount of moisture. Well, when you throw more moisture into the air, aka the crop evapotranspiration from soybeans, from corn, the more of that you plant and the more crops you have, the more greenery you have, the more moisture you're going to put in the air. Air that has more moisture is not capable of holding nearly as much heat. So that is one of the reasons likely that could be contributing to this. Not to, again, put the total blame on farmers, but that is definitely an influential part of what's going on with our 90-degree trend here. We're seeing more and more of that and more evidence as time goes on. So yes, that is definitely one of the components that we're seeing to this lowering trend of getting these 90-plus degree days in here each year. So that was some fascinating stuff. The other question we answered this week too was, are we seeing a colder April? If we're heating up in September and we were noticing that big sharp climb, increase in the temperature, the average temperature at the end of the month, what is April doing? So I went ahead and got the April data, and I'll show that to you here. So again, each red bar represents the average high temperature as we go through the month of April, dating all the way back to the early 1900s. The black bar, which is the one we want to concentrate on right here, that is our trend line, showing us, are we seeing warmer temperatures in April, or are we seeing cooler temperatures in April? Now, this line is not nearly as dramatic as what we saw with the September line. The September line kind of went whoop. This one is a little bit more flatlined. So we are not seeing cooler or colder conditions in April by any stretch of the imagination here. The data confirming that, for the most part, April temperatures have been pretty flat the last 20, 25 years or so. If you go back to 2000, 25 years worth of data, you notice that black line really doesn't move up a whole lot. It moves up a little, but nothing like what we saw in September. Also, look at your top 10 here for warmest Aprils, and you can see there's quite a few years on there that are not that far removed from this year. You've got 2023 on there, 2015, 2005, 2006, 2010, and 2001. So a little bit of warming going on in April. No cold going on in April, that's for sure. Our temperatures are not falling. They're staying fairly steady, if not rising just a little bit. So some great questions this week. Before I get to your questions, we're at the 15-minute past the top of the hour mark. If you didn't see, we had some big news earlier this week, and that is we've had our first confirmed EF5 tornado in 12 years. We've been in this massive EF5 tornado drought for that long, for more than a decade. That EF5 was actually an upgrade from an EF4 tornado that struck earlier this summer in North Dakota. This was on June 20th. So right now it has a rating of EF5, winds of 210 miles per hour. The last EF5 we had was in Oklahoma, and that was back in 2013. Long time ago. This is going to be an interesting case to study. This is one of the first times, as far as I know, that the National Weather Service has collaborated with some really advanced folks that know what they're talking about in terms of physics of rail cars and some other structures. In fact, I'll post on my social media page some of the physics and some of the equations they were using to make this determination for this rating of this tornado. What changed was there was actually a line of railroad cars, and they were full railroad cars that the tornado passed over. One of those cars was lifted into the air. It was a full one, and it was moved more than 450 feet away from the tracks. I wish I could showed you a picture. A lot of them are copyrighted, and I don't want to violate anybody's work that they worked hard to do that for. But a simple Google search, you'll be able to find it pretty easily. But that full rail car was pushed more than a football field and a half away from the tracks. That is a very violent signature, and that is what prompted them to upgrade this to an EF5. One of the equations that they used to try to determine wind speed in terms of toppling that rail car had winds well in excess of 210 miles an hour. One of them had 235 mile per hour winds in that equation. So again, I will post it on my social media post. I think we'll even do maybe a deeper dive into that next week here on Ask Andrew Live, because this could potentially be a game changer for those of us in the land of meteorology. If we can use a lot more of these forensic tools in our investigations for tornado damage, we may start to see eventually EF5 ratings return to a lot of these more violent and stronger tornadoes. There are a lot of folks, and I don't blame them, on the internet right now that think we've had at least a dozen EF5s since 2013. That is certainly possible. It's not set in stone because that determination has not been made, but I tell you what, it has opened up a whole ton of debate on social media right now, especially in the storm chaser community, on, this could potentially change where we're heading in terms of tornado ratings in the future. This particular tornado could set the precedent to see more EF5 ratings return if we continue to use that forensic meteorology that was used in this particular storm. That, I think, no one was expecting on their bingo card this year, that we would have an EF5 tornado. Again, it's been since 2013 since we've had one. A very long time. This is one of the photos I can show you, and I'll put that back on the screen because it doesn't have a copyright attached to it, from the National Weather Service. This is also one of the damage indicators they used for that tornado as well. This, of course, is a tree. Obviously, you can see that. But what they call the root ball, which is this right here, not only was the tree uprooted, but the entire tree and the root ball, the ball of roots attached to it, was thrown a significant distance. In addition, you can see down here, the bark has been completely stripped off the tree. That is another EF5 damage indicator that we look for when we do these storm surveys. So those two things right there, using a little bit more forensic meteorology, and there we have our first EF5 since 2013. Here's the calendar of those EF5s, by the way, too, and I apologize for the misspelling there. But you can see how it used to be we had many, many reports of EF5s dating all the way back to 1953. Now, of course, the EF scale, the F scale converted to EF scale not that long ago. And once that happened, you can see how the number of violent F5/EF5 tornadoes dropped off significantly to almost nothing because we changed the damage criteria for that. But here we are. There's the last one, Moore, Oklahoma, May 20th, 2013. Now the most recent being the one we had this year in June in North Dakota. That is some amazing stuff. Again, I would love to do a deeper dive into that next week during Ask Andrew Live. That is just absolutely fascinating stuff. And never thought I would be talking about the fact that we had an EF5 tornado this year in the United States. There are a lot of folks that thought that is never, ever going to happen again for quite a long, long time. And that just goes to prove you wrong right there. Really cool stuff. So again, I'll post more on that on my Facebook page this afternoon. Some really, really cool stuff to look into. Let's go to your questions now and see who we have with us this morning. Welcome aboard. Again, if it's your first time, the questions go right down here to this number, 309-304-0888. 309-304-0888 is where you want to send those questions to. All right, we're going to start with Brenda Y. Sending in this question. I live on top of the hill in Silvis and just behind the Bollesburg Elementary School. My girlfriend lives below the hill in Kelowna near the grade school, a distance of about 3.5 miles. We have the same rain gauge. This morning, my gauge showed 1 1/4 inch of rain and hers only about 1/2 inch of rain. We have noted that difference many times, particularly this summer when my location would receive rain measurements considerably higher than hers, and many times when those brief summer showers did not reach her home location at all. Any explanation of this weather phenomenon? Yes. Rainfall, especially in the warm season, which we're in right now, we consider the warm season to be spring through summer and then early fall, is extremely variable. Why is that the case? It's because we're not dealing with widespread soaking rains. Those we usually get in the early spring, the late fall, and then, of course, for the winter. If I can get this radar data to load, and I know it's a big lift, I'm going to ask a lot of our little graphic system here. I will pull up the radar presentation that we had from those storms that moved through Monday night into Tuesday morning, into yesterday morning. I'm going to see if it's going to let me do that, so give me 1 second here. I'm going to adjust some of these parameters. I'm going to go back. Let's go 48 hours. That might be far enough. It might not be. We're going to find out here. So I'm going to put that in full screen behind me. I'm going to move my timeline back here a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and zoom this in. So I'm going to show you just kind of how variable this rainfall is and how isolated these heavier pockets of rain can be. And I think this is going to work beautifully. So you know what? We're just going to go for it. We're going to push our timeline ahead and get us into Monday night. So this is a perfect explanation right here. Notice we have these little pockets of heavier rain. And notice how small they are. They're not large and they're not a solid line like what we typically see with some of these more robust rain events. No, these are much, much smaller in size. So what you're going to find is you get these extremely localized heavy rainfall amounts. And I certainly saw that. One good example was Prophetstown, which got 1.7 inches of rain. I went over to the Linden rain gauge and then to the Morrison one and then the Kalita one, or not the Kalita one, the Tampico one, and then to Sterling Rock Falls. Nowhere near that amount because of how isolated these storms were, the isolated nature of these heavier pockets of rain. If I pull this forward a few more hours, you're going to see that that continues to be the case. It gets a little bit more widespread here as it goes east of the Quad Cities, but we're still only seeing these really small concentrated areas of heavier rainfall. What we would like to see and what we will see as we go deeper into the fall season and into the winter is you're going to see a lot more uniformity to these rain bands. Everyone is going to have nearly similar numbers as these storm systems move through. They become stronger. They involve a lot more upward lift. It's not concentrated in these little pockets anymore. It's more broad. So that's why you're seeing the big discrepancy in the rainfall. In the summertime is notorious for that, especially with those pop-up thunderstorms that we get where it could be raining on one side of town and not raining on the other side of town? So that is an excellent question, Brenda. Thank you for sending that in. Also, I'm curious, what kind of rain gauge are you using? Are you using one of those, that you find at the farm store, the cutesy ones, the decorative ones, or are you using like an actual rain gauge that's its only purpose? It's not a decoration. I'd be curious to let you know. From Chris, can you explain a downburst where the water falls rapidly and causes strong winds as well? Yes, I believe in my little suite of knowledge of graphics here. Let me see if I can find that explainer, because a downburst can be a very dangerous thing, especially if you're a pilot. That can really, really wreak havoc. So let's see if I have anything in here. Is anything going to come up? There it is. Oh, this is an old one, so you're going to see some old school logos on this, and that's okay. Sometimes we do a throwback on Ask Andrew Live. Good morning, Ava. You're fine. You can walk in the camera any day if you want to. So when it comes to what is a downburst, this is a very, very complicated process, but we're going to explain it here. So with a thunderstorm, you're going to have this warm updraft of air. What happens is that air actually loses its ability to float, or its buoyancy. And once it gets within the core of the cloud, that air cools. And as we've told you before, cold air is a lot more dense than warm air. So as that air is cooling, it's getting heavier and it's getting heavier. And then what you're doing on top of the air getting heavier is you are adding rain into that mix. So not only do you have the velocity or the speed of the air coming down, you also have the velocity and speed of the raindrops coming down. So those two things on top of each other, pulling all of that air down to the ground, that is what's your perfect setup for a downburst wind event. These are especially set up perfectly when you've got a day where it's not overly humid. This time of year, early in the spring, before we get all that moisture that comes in here, that's where you get your downburst winds. You need a little pocket of some dry air aloft here to kind of split this in half to further enhance the ability for that air to break through and fall down to the ground where we live. So downbursts, very, very damaging thing. They can cause tornado-like damage, wind speeds greater than 70, 80 miles an hour. They're also dangerous to planes, too. They've caused many crashes in our aviation history. All right, we have another question here from Billy. Good morning. He's always up and early with us here. He has two questions for us this week. My first question is, will our second severe season still happen, or has it been hindered due to the ongoing hurricane season? And the second question, what is the criteria for red flag fire weather warnings? Thank you for your time. Hope everyone has a wonderful day, and we hope you have a wonderful day as well, Billy. Let's tackle the first question right now, asking about that second severe weather season. Will we still have that? I do believe we will. I do not believe whatsoever that we are done with severe weather. We are likely due for another at least one event, maybe two. But what we're going to have to wait for is we have not had the jet stream orientation at all to get that to be realized. Our jet stream has been shoved all the way to the north, which is why we've been so warm. What we want to see is we want to see a really nice dip in that jet stream sitting just to the west of us, reaching down to places like Arizona, New Mexico, and then slowly moving east. We just haven't had that yet. However, as we get deeper into fall, we will likely start to see that jet stream orientation take shape, and then our chance for some severe weather will come back. Remember, severe weather season knows no month. We've had severe weather in October, November, December, January, February. You name it, every month we've had severe weather here in the Quad Cities. So don't think we're done with that quite yet. Your other question regarding the fire risk. There is a product on the National Weather Service's website, and I can send you the link if you like. It is a digital product that uses a combination of relative humidity, temperature, wind speed, and also kind of measuring the dryness of the vegetation, so your grasses, your crops. And then that goes into a big fancy calculation, but on this specific website, there's a nice map they give you. And there's all these different values. So if it exceeds a certain value, they call it a GDFI value, that's when they'll issue these red flag warnings or these fire warnings. So Billy, if you'd like, I can send that to you. I think I can probably get it to you on X if you're still on that platform. Otherwise, just shoot me a message on my Facebook page and I can send that link to you as well. It's something we're trying to get into our graphic system that we can show you visually. We just haven't found a way to get it there quite yet. Last question I got here as we're approaching 30 minutes, to bottom of the half hour here. What is your favorite weather phenomenon to study and learn about, and why? I would say I have two. One being derechos, because what we saw back in 2020. Two being ice storms, because both of those are extremely impactful, and they also impact very large areas at a time. Those are the two things I love most. If I've always said two, third, if I had the financial resources to do so, I would go back to school and study tropical meteorology, because hurricanes and tropical storms, absolutely fascinating, and I would love to learn more about those. But that costs money. So if anybody wants to pay for me to go back to tropical weather school, I'm all ears. But yeah, that maybe will be something I do in retirement if I get bored, I guess. Great questions this week, guys. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Love doing this every week with you here on the A+ app. I'll be back next week again, same time, right here on the A+ app. Don't forget, we also have GMQC at 11 coming up, about 90 minutes from now. We'll hope you tune into that as well. But for now, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Take care, Quad Cities.